And lactate leaves the muscle, it's converted back into pyruvate in the liver, and then reformed into glucose. This process is called the Cori cycle. And the newly formed glucose then makes its way back to the blood and then to the muscles to produce ATP in this glycolytic energy system. Think of it this way. Pretend you're doing hard exercise intervals like running uphill. Eventually, you will feel your legs begin to burn, which is just an indication that the energy is being produced and the acidity is increasing in your muscles. This, again, is caused by the hydrogen ions that are a product of glycolysis, and they ultimately combine with pyruvate to form lactic acid. Likely, the pain associated with the acidity increasing in your legs will make you slow down. Now, having slowed down, you're able to actually use that build-up lactate by transforming it back into glucose to provide more fuel to produce ATP in this energy system. Because you slowed down and allowed yourself to catch your breath, that is, allowed oxygen to be available to your metabolic processes, you begin again to transform pyruvate, the end product of glycolysis, into another molecule called acetyl coenzyme A, or acetyl-CoA, rather than forming lactate. It is this acetyl-CoA that can then move into the third energy system to provide even more ATP. Acetyl-CoA is actually called the common intermediate for energy production, because in order to make lots of ATP in the third energy system, you must first form acetyl-CoA, no matter if you are burning carbohydrates, fats, or proteins as your energy source. It is the common point for entry of all these fuels to make energy in the oxidative system. We've discussed the creatine phosphate system, the glycolytic system. So the third energy system is the oxidative system. This energy system relies upon carbohydrates, fats, and in some cases protein to provide ATP. The oxidative system is your long and slow system, which kicks in after about 90 seconds to 2 minutes of activity and can last almost indefinitely, as long as the intensity of activity is low to moderate. It's aerobic, unlike the other two energy systems, so it uses oxygen. As you know, with sufficient oxygen from slowing down to breathe a little during vigorous exercise, the pyruvate will get transferred into acetyl-CoA rather than forming lactate in the glycolytic energy system. It is through the aerobic transformation of acetyl-CoA that glucose and fat continue to be metabolized with this third energy system, aerobic glycolysis, or the oxidative system. Here, the acetyl-CoA will now enter what is called the Krebs cycle, or the citric acid cycle. In the Krebs cycle, and further down the metabolic pathway, you get to begin to produce much more ATP than was possible in the first two energy systems. This production of ATP is completed in the electron transport chain where oxygen is present. So, because oxygen must be present, this means that the system works when you are working at a low to moderate level of activity, or simply sitting still. For example, if you are walking, you'll be using the aerobic system to produce energy. The way the electron transport chain works is by shuttling electrons down the electron transport chain to create a concentration gradient that ultimately works to produce ATP using an enzyme called ATP synthase. If glucose is being used in this third system to make ATP, you can make almost 40 molecules of ATP. Compare this to the 2 to 3 molecules of ATP made in the glycolytic system, and you can easily see that much more ATP is made with the aerobic oxidative system. Here's another really cool aspect of metabolism. When fat is used in the oxidative system, this is where you really make a lot of energy. Now, fat burning, or fat oxidation, requires more oxygen per ATP produced compared to energy production from glucose or glycogen. Meaning, once again, you need to be resting or working out at a slow to moderate intensity to utilize fat as a fuel. However, fat provides 12 times more ATP than glucose, just at a slower rate. So now, it is easy to see why fat is thought of as an almost endless source of energy. Fat provides lots of ATP, and we have lots of stored fat on our bodies, even if you are very lean. The oxidative system is active for most of your day, while sitting at a computer, walking around, or even when just watching TV. Again, carbohydrates and fats are the primary fuel sources used to provide ATP in the oxidative system. But this system can also metabolize some protein for energy production. This does not typically happen, though, unless someone has been exercising for a very long time, say longer than 2 to 3 hours, or for someone who has not eaten in a long time. Keep in mind, though, that you never only use fat or only use carbs. The reality is that the fuel used to provide ATP in these energy systems is typically a combination of fuels, and again, not an all or none sort of action. For example, while you're at rest and just sitting around, about 2/3 of the ATP you make is from fat, and 1/3 will be from carbohydrates. What is really interesting is that the more fit you are, the better you are at using fat as a fuel. Also, the more fit you are, the better you are at saving your stored glucose or glycogen until you really need it, like when you pick up the intensity of your exercise. This is just one more reason to consider adding physical activity into your daily lifestyle. It will impact the fuel you use all day long. You see, as you exercise and your training status increases, you can increase the number of mitochondria that you have in the cells of the muscles at work. This is called mitochondrial density, and you want it to be high. The mitochondria are the organelles within your cells that help you produce large amounts of ATP. So it makes sense, right? The more you exercise, the more you put exercise into your lifestyle, the better you are at making energy. Another benefit is that you can increase the number of capillaries, or small blood vessels you have to bring blood, oxygen, and other nutrients to working muscles. This is called capillary density, which you also want to be high. What's more is that with exercise training, you actually increase the activity of enzymes called lipases that increase fat breakdown. Exercise also increases the hormones that are used to help initiate this fat breakdown. So, by maintaining exercise as part of your life, you increase the ability to use fuels effectively by your body. And here's the key. You decrease your reliance upon carbohydrates and use more fat as a fuel, regardless of what you're doing all day long. This means that at rest and during exercise, you are burning a greater amount of fat. And over time, this will no doubt impact your body composition. The fat that is used to make ATP can come from stored fat tissue, like around your waists and hips, but it can also come from dietary fat that you've eaten. You even have fat stored in your muscles to use for energy. And this type of fat is called intramuscular triglycerides, or IMTG. Interestingly, you'll find intramuscular triglycerides in both very fit and also in out-of-shape people. But how these stored depots of fat are utilized is extremely different between the fit and the unfit. For the out-of-shape people, these intramuscular fat stores can actually do harm and alter proper cell signaling that should occur in response to various hormones. But in physically active people, the intramuscular fats tend to be used as an energy source, sparing glycogen and increasing fat use for activity. So while both fat and carbs will be used in the oxidative system, the amount of fat used compared to how much carbohydrate is used is highly dependent upon a number of key factors. These factors include things like, when did you last eat? When did you last exercise? How fit are you? And what hormones are circulating in your blood? All of these aspects of how fuel is used to alter body composition will be covered in this course. But for now, just know that the human body is absolutely amazing and adjusts to what you eat by burning more of that type of nutrient. For example, in a healthy person, you should be able to use more fat for fuel when you eat more fat, when you have not eaten for a long time, or during prolonged periods of exercise. This ability to shift easily from one fuel source to the other, based upon the exact circumstance, is called metabolic flexibility. Interestingly, researchers are now investigating people who are unable to switch easily between fuel sources, those who might be classified as metabolically inflexible. What we know now is that being sedentary, overweight, or obese is associated with less metabolic flexibility. Essentially, someone who is obese may have more trouble burning fat as a fuel than someone who is physically active and lean. One really cool part about metabolic flexibility is that in a lab setting, we can actually measure what fuel source, fat or carbohydrate, you are using. This is done by measuring the amounts of carbon dioxide and oxygen in your breath at rest or during exercise. The ratio of carbon dioxide produced to oxygen consumed is called the respiratory exchange ratio, or RER. When burning 100% fat for fuel, your RER is equal to 0.7. But when burning 100% carbohydrate for energy, your RER is 1.0. So, when walking slowly, you'll be using primarily fat to produce ATP because this is aerobic and would use the oxidative energy system. And as a result, your RER would be at or very close to 0.7. But as you increase the intensity of your walk to a jog or to a run and move into the glycolytic energy system, you'll use much more carbohydrate as the primary fuel source. Here, your RER would be at or near 1.0. Basically, the faster and harder you go, the greater percent of carbohydrate that will be used to make energy or ATP. But keep in mind that there will always be a mix of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins used to produce energy. The more metabolically flexible you are, the better you will be at using energy sources at the exact right moment. So now you can see that when you are doing low-intensity effort, walking, working while sedentary, or watching